In the many years she'd been working as an instructor in etiquette, Miss Edwina Dalrymple had advised everyone from the daughters of powerful members of the gentry to the daughters of obscenely wealthy merchants. She taught women who'd not so much as attempted a curtsy in their life the intricate and essential motions they required among the previously unfamiliar polite society. She'd written articles offering advice to young women new to the ton. She'd even written, although not sold so very many copies of, a manual with her instructions and advice meticulously laid out. In all the time she'd worked in her respective positions, however, she'd never entertained a duke and duchess. Though, in fairness, there wasn't an overabundance of those highest of peers below a prince. Even if there had been, however, they'd certainly never sought to enlist her services. Or they hadn't before now. At that very moment, the Duke and Duchess of Bentley stared across Edwina's modest chestnut table. Etched upon their faces were matched expressions of austere confidence and regal power. It was a skill they'd likely perfected in their respective nurseries, and one Edwina had schooled countless students on. And the Duke and Duchess also represented the closest Edwina had ever found herself to the dream she'd long carried of working among their vaunted ranks. 10 years. It had been 10 years nearly to the date that she'd secured herself references that would set her on a course to be the most sought-after and, more importantly, most respected governess. Folding her hands neatly before her, Edwina opted to train her focus on the Duke of Bentley. "You would like me to instruct your child?" Because really the matter of that out-of-the-blue request required clarification. A Duke and Duchess seeking her services... such an outrageous impossibility, one she'd only ever carried in her dreams. She discreetly pinched her thigh. No, she was most definitely awake. The Duke nodded. "That is correct. However, he is not a child in the traditional sense." Edwina sat up straighter on the upholstered armchair and waited for him to say more. "Your Grace?" she asked, seeking clarification. The Duchess silenced her husband with a single look, the manner of which Edwina had used sparingly and only with her most recalcitrant charges in order to preserve its effectiveness. And, wonder of wonders, it appeared even dukes could be tamed. The just greying gentleman adjusted his cravat and sat back in the sofa he occupied alongside his wife. For the first time since they'd arrived, and the Duke had stated his intentions to hire Edwina, the Duchess took command of the meeting. "We've come to enlist your services, Miss Dalrymple," her Grace intoned, "and I gather from your response you are wondering why we've requested you specifically." The gentleness in the Duchess's tone kept that question from being an insult. The Duke frowned at his wife. "We do not mean to offend you." His wife gave him another look, this one a wry smile that proved just as effective in silencing him. "By everything I've read to you about her, the woman is clever enough to know. She knows that we're aware she's never had a patron among the peerage." "That is correct," Edwina murmured, appreciating that directness and honesty. People of their station did not solicit her help, unless they had to. "I have never had a client who was born to the peerage." Once that truth had stung. Edwina, however, in time and with her work, had come to appreciate her lot for what it was, outside the sphere of the ruling elite. Despite the fact she'd been working her way to establish a place among them from the start. As such, I must confess to some surprise and elation. Under her hem, Edwina danced her slippered feet about in a quiet, unseen celebration.